interested in how you got into, because I've watched a couple of your videos, obviously read your posts, but what really opened a kind of window was realizing that you are in Toastmasters. Is that right? Because
Yes.
one of several people that I really admire by the way that they communicate, by the way they make their messages easy for or clear and accessible to other people, have this connection, which is Toastmasters, and you have that. You have that, which I just like to explain. What was your motivation? And I'll tell you why I think we've got a bit of a link there. It's not through Toastmasters, but I'm really interested. How did you start? What was your motivation? Was it something somebody said? Was it an objective for you that I want to do this? And how does it
I think
help you?
that is, I'll tell you, my plan was that I'm going to start it with your introduction. But again, as I am absolutely ready to take on that challenge, so let me start by answering what you just said. Okay, and first of all, thank you so much for reading about my profile. Yes, I'm into Toastmasters. Nobody really told me anything about it, which I really felt if I would have come across someone who could have guided that there is a community which can really aid you in becoming a better public speaker. So I'll tell you, my journey started last year in 2022, somewhere around the same time. I think it was 17th or 18th November, where I posted my first video out of the blue. I was just randomly sitting and, I picked up my phone, I just recorded roughly and I just posted it. And that's how it got kicked off. And the motivation behind this is actually, I always felt that I have a different perspective of looking at things. Always, like I would say since childhood, it's just that when you are different, you're rebuked a lot. People go against you. You usually don't have, a gathering because you think differently. So this is what used to happen with me even since childhood. But it took me a lot of time to understand that what I have is a unique thing. And I also have the courage to voice out what I think about it, because I've also met people who really have some incredible thoughts about society, about encouraging each other, but then they're not able to voice out. They can't show that kind of courage. I feel that I have that right combination. I have thoughts, I have that courage that I can voice out. And let me just start. Maybe I'm not a great public speaker, but let me get on that journey.
I think you are, actually. I think you are, but that's my opinion.
Thank you so much. That's really kind of you. So that's how my journey actually got started. And I started coming up online every week, like Saturday or Sundays. I started posting short videos. So I basically, number one, about the perspective I have. And I really felt that there are so many things I think differently. And if I'm able to voice it out, and if I'm able to help out some people in some different way, that would be a wonderful thing that I could do in my life. Parallelly, that was also a time wherein I was saying it to myself that I have a good job, I have this, but still I feel there's something lacking. What is that lack? I wasn't able to figure out. So as the great people have said that you need to identify your purpose in life, I kind of felt that maybe that purpose, I don't know what is the purpose, why am I here? So I kind of asking that question. So eventually I came across this thing and I felt that, okay, yeah, I think I would like to help out people in whatever capacity I can. So let me just give it a go.
Absolutely.
Now, once my journey of podcasting started, like I started doing mono videos, and then I gotten into wherein I'm able to invite people and have a conversation with great people such as you, I felt that I need to have an audience. I had voice, I had courage, but I needed audience to practice. Who will invite me? Because I don't have strong credentials as of now. Nobody knows who Kashira is, and I basically needed audience. As you would know, in today's generation of generative AI, where whatever you think, it pops up on your phone or on your laptop, that is what happened with me.
Yeah.
So I was thinking subconsciously that I need to have an audience. I need a place where I can practice, a place where I can be fearlessly making errors, identifying it and fixing them. And that's how Toastmasters ad popped up on my mobile. And I was like, what is this? So
Yeah.
I remember it was a little funny, but I ignored that ad once or twice. Again, it
Mm.
popped up and I was like, okay, what is this Toastmasters? Because I think it comes up with a mic in its picture or something.
Mm-hmm.
I said, okay,
Mm-hmm.
let me explore. And that was the time I started it. And I was like, oh my God, this is a blessing for people who want to be in public speaking. It gives you
Yep.
live audience to practice.
Yep. Yep.
That's the
Absolutely.
most beautiful thing about it. And yeah, so whenever I speak in Toastmasters Club, by God's grace, I've started speaking outside as well. So it feels really great because the practice I'm able to do there in front of the live audience, that brings a different kind of a confidence.
Yeah.
And public speaking is all about being in touch with public speaking.
Mm-hmm. No, it's so inspiring listening to this, because it's really quite simple. Whether we're talking about English language, or whether we're talking about public speaking, whatever we're talking about, it usually comes down to those three elements of it's courage, because I think it sounds pretty weird connection, but I was talking about this to somebody about 2 hours ago, a potential client who he's got the courage, basically, in the way that you described, not just to think in a different way, but I actually want to do something different and do something difficult. So it's courage, it's confidence, and then it's momentum. Okay, and you have you said somehow you were in the right place, listening to the right message at the right time. But that's because you kind of knew that you have this itch that you need to scratch. You need to do something about this. So you got the ingredients, you got the courage and that's all you need. I mean, essentially, I think it was Winston Churchill said, courage is the greatest of the virtues, because all of the other virtues flow from that. If you've got that, you can do anything. And it just sounds, that story is your story, but it's actually, these are universal, I don't know, simplifications, if you like. We spend so much of our time kind of making life very complex.
Yeah.
But as Toastmasters, I'm not familiar with the methodology, but I know that you give talks, you give feedback, you learn by doing, which we all know is the most effective way of. It doesn't mean you do things properly, but as you say, you have the courage to make mistakes, to accept that if you're going to do anything new, anything creative, you're going to make mistakes. You're going to, you're not going to do it right the first time or even the fifth time. Who cares?
True.
That's very admirable, Kashira.
Thank you so much.
No, but what you project, seriously, I mean, what do you project? You do project this ease, this glamour, this, I'm familiar with this. I know what I'm doing. I know what I'm saying is useful for people, and I'm doing it, as you've explained, with a kind of open heart. I want to help people, and the rest just flows from that. Would that most, would that a lot of people have that kind of clarity to get on with the things that they need to do. So good for you. Have you heard of a guy called Mohammed Katani? I think he's a bit of a Toastmasters. Mohammed Katani. I'll send you his talk. He's a bit of a Toastmasters rock star, because he won the kind of Toastmasters Universal, whatever the award was. And he just gives a brilliant talk, which I'm sure you can explain, has a lot of techniques, a lot of things that are practiced, but most of all, it has the confidence of somebody who is prepared, who knows what he's saying, who's saying something important, and because he's practiced so much, clearly he has that kind of apparent spontaneity that people react to, that people love, because you're so good, you're so confident, you're so practiced, like almost like an actor, that people think this is just natural. This is what this person does all the time.
Yeah.
And that must be such a buzz when that happens, when you have that effect on people.
Yeah,
not in a
true.
manipulative way, in a kind of inspirational way. And
In an
that's when you
inspirational
become
way.
the kind of role
Yeah.
model. Sorry.
Yeah, no, absolutely. You're right. And I remember when I was exploring public speaking and all the aspects of it, I used to like, why do you need to practice? Like when I started in Toastmasters specifically, it is all about practice.
Mhm.
I would say more about practice and feedbacks, as you rightly mentioned. It took me time to understand their concept, a lot of time to understand their protocols, because I initially felt that, oh, they are too much about rules and protocols and this and
Yes.
that. I want to be spontaneous. I want to be
Yes.
able to answer what the people are saying instantly. So for me,
Mhm.
it was really difficult to digest the idea of practicing so much. I remember, as per their module, the first speech is of icebreaker speech.
Mhm.
That is
Yes.
what they say. All of a sudden somebody wasn't appearing in this speech slot, messaged them and it's like, I can take that up. And it was just 2 hours before the main meeting. And they're like,
Mhm.
2 hours, are you prepared? I said, no, it's just icebreaker and I have to talk about myself and I can do it. So I was confident. I still won't say I was overconfident. I was confident. I appeared in it
Mhm.
and it went really well. It went really well. But later I realized that there is a difference. First of all, it is all about different contexts and what kind of speeches and what kind of audience you are addressing. And it
Mhm.
is absolutely important to be able to be prepared at certain level,
Yep.
because when you are, it gives you that confidence that, okay, you are there and you have the grip on the stage, you have the grip on the audience, and now you can go fluid. Now you can take up
Yes.
things and be spontaneous as well. Yeah,
Yes.
so that realization, that what is the importance of being prepared, was a very important realization for me.
Yeah.
That, the initial few seconds, initial few minutes, if you're prepared about your opening, prepared about whatever you're talking about, later you just go as fluid as you want, but you have left the impression on the audience.
Yes.
Suppose you opening up like any news or any speech, and you fumble in the first line, you've lost
Yeah.
the audience.
Exactly. Yes. They're not prepared to give you that opportunity to make
True.
them feel embarrassed for
Yeah.
you. That's, I think, I'm not a psychologist, but I know it. We hate it when people make us feel nervous, because of what they're doing. That's you're so right to get those first 4 or 5 sentences, what we call off pat, so
Yeah.
that you, and also your closing 4 or 5
Yes.
sentences,
Yes.
and knowing when to pause and knowing when to leave, and those are the kind of, that you can either call them nuances or you can call them techniques, but those are the kind of structures which allow you to do what I think you naturally, Kashira, you're a risk taker. That's however you define that. It's not always jumping off mountains and parachuting and all that kind of stuff. It's being somewhere where you're not quite sure where the conversation is going, or you're not quite sure whether you've got the answer, but you're prepared to take that risk. If that's on a firm basis, it becomes an illustration of your intelligence, your empathy, your whatever it is. But if that's a kind of consistent, if that's just how you live your life, then it might be thrilling, but it's not very helpful for everybody else, because they don't know where you're going next.
True. True.
Yeah.
And that actually reminds me of something really important. I think I was watching some video on public speaking a couple of days ago, and there was this speaker. That person said, when you're not confident on stage, you make your audience nervous.
Yes. Yeah.
And that is the most uncomfortable feeling, because
Oh,
when
it's
your
terrible.
audience is there, as much as you want to succeed, they
Yeah.
equally want you to succeed. When you're on
Yes.
this stage and you've just lost it, you have transferred your nervousness, and now everybody's like, oh my God, is she
Yes.
going to do something really, embarrassing? Is she going to fumble?
Yeah.
Those kind
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
things. And when I heard it, I could actually relate back to a couple of incidences in my own life.
Yeah.
There have been some really grand events, and the host came in. I think that host didn't have enough. That person was to speak something about team engagement activity. That guy started with some, kind of humorous line that didn't land anywhere, and he fumbled in there. And
Yeah.
he was coming from a big company to host the team engagement.
Mm.
It
Mm.
That guy just lost the audience, and
Yeah.
we
Big
all,
shot.
big
Yeah.
shot.
Yeah.
I could feel that nervousness, that, oh my God, is he gonna, fumble again? Oh, I really hope he's fine. That kind of
Yeah.
feeling. So speaker and audiences, they are equally there in the moment. So it's really important to be able to, I mean, of course, anybody can fumble. It's just that how gracefully you're able to pick it back
Yes.
and still keep it intact. That
Well,
matters a lot.
I mean, the way you speak, the way you speak now. I can it's almost like it was that. Well, if I do that, then can I rescue it with this? And you're always in control. But what you referred to is a lot of the time, even before people even, if it's in a kind of physical meeting, even before they get on the stage, because we understand body language. And
Yeah,
as body language and also our voice, which tends to go up an octave when we're in when we're challenging. It's even before somebody has even said anything, we know what the context is. So
yeah,
if you can, again, you can't stop being who you are, but if you practice, if you have a kind of an understanding of how people perceive you, which is, it's not easy, but, as you will know, you manage these things by how you hold yourself, by how you breathe before you rush into your whatever you're going to say,
true.
by the how you control. But here's me telling you how Toastmasters work. Isn't that ironic? But so many of these things, so many of these concepts are, are directly related to the how people feel about English. They kind of
True.
think they have to have they either just, like I said, don't prepare at all and things go crazy very quickly, or they think they have to prepare everything, and when they can't control everything, it's catastrophe. And of course, real life and public speaking it's somewhere in between.
True, 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 true. And I have to say this. I'm loving this conversation because I forgot
Oh,
I
good.
was the host and you're the guest.
I did warn you.
So
I did warn you.
I know I am strongly holding that challenge. So we will continue doing that. But I have to give a glimpse of who I'm talking to, because I'm sure my audience doesn't know you
Okay.
still. So I'm going to introduce you, just a really powerful line which I could gain from your LinkedIn profile, because that's how we are connected. Is So, ladies and gentlemen, today we are speaking with Nigel Clark. It's Nigel, right?
Perfect. Yes,
Nigel,
absolutely.
yeah. So we are speaking with Nigel Clark, and why this conversation is already so interesting, you've already gained the insight of it. So he's somebody who transforms the way professionals speak in English, especially at an international level. Since the time I'm connected with Nigel, this I have run through each and every post he does, and every post of his is super interesting because he comes up with some really basic and unique thing which we all as an aspiring speakers require to understand. Though I've already welcomed you officially, welcome Nigel to my podcast of Simplifying Life with Kashira. Thank you so much for taking out time.
Well, thank you very much for having me, Kashira. How can you resist something as clear as simplifying life with Kashira?
Thank you so much. I'm honored. So that actually brings me to ask you. I know you've already asked me good number of questions, and I am delighted to share my story. But that brings me to asking you that, your expertise in helping out professionals dealing with the complexities of English language. I want to understand what got you on this journey. What inspired you to embark on this journey to help people out in their communication?
Well, it's that's a great question. What was the inspiration? Well, I think it's probably because unusually for a Brit, I've actually been in the situation where I'm working in a market or several markets where I have to communicate in another language and in another business culture. It's something that for me I kind of positively pursued. I had that something in my brain. I didn't want to live a life on this cold and wet and windy island. I wanted to live and work in another culture, which I managed to do. So when I worked in Spain, for example, I was managing businesses and doing business in a completely different way, in a completely different language. And so the first thing is I've got that understanding of how big a challenge that is, although it's in a different language. We're talking about English. And then in terms of what really inspired me to do what I do is there was one friend of mine. It was nothing to do with business. I wasn't even teaching English, but it was a good friend of mine who was pursuing an opportunity in the United States. He was Spanish. He worked for a French big multinational IT consultant, and he a bit like me, he wanted to go and test himself in another industry, in another market, take his very young family with him, and I managed to coach him in a very, very simple interview technique called the STAR system, which is basically it's an acronym for when somebody asks you a question and you're trying to give them a story, you attach it to situation, task, achievement, result. So you tell something about yourself or a series of stories about yourself. Anyway, this worked so well that he got the job. And, the rest, as they say, is history. But it literally changed his life and changed that of his family. And I thought, this is a really cool thing to do. I like this. It wasn't that I felt like God, but I thought I could see that Jose Angel, this guy, I could see all of this. It was obvious to me that he was perfect for this job. He was full of doubts. But once we focused him on what he needed to say, the rest he was able to achieve just on his own, by his own knowledge, charisma, and experience. So, but it was a great thing to be able to help him to do, and that's really what I've continued to do ever since. Sorry, that was a long answer to a very short question.
That's a really interesting story, I would say, and thank you for sharing that, because that gives us the insight. It happens with so many people where you are born and brought up. You may not get that kind of opportunity in that place. One has to move out and settle outside. And we need to understand that cultural differences, even in the communication, even if we are not relocating, by being at one place, for example, I'm here, I have to interact with global audience. Given the nature of my work. So it becomes more important to understand these nuances in the communication so that we don't lose them and we're able to communicate clearly. Thank you so much for sharing that story.
No problem. But what I think connects us is you have, your tagline is simplifying life. And it really resonates because the story I've just given is so representative of a lot of people. We have an expression in English, which is you have to get out of your own way. Basically, we naturally construct all these reasons why I can't do it, or why I'm not the best, or why somebody else is going to stop me. We just construct barriers to our own progress, and actually just getting rid of all that noise, simplifying what is it that you want to do, and how are we going to get there, and just those basic questions, simplifying for people. They realize that actually it's not as difficult or intimidating or takes as much time. They just have to keep moving forward. That's
true. And I think this is the best explanation of simplifying life. It's all about silencing the noise around us.
Yes, absolutely.
And the noise of so many things, the
yes.
noise of our own chaos, our internal chaos, more than the people outside.
There's a very good book by a guy called David McCraney. He's a psychologist, and he understands so many of the issues that we have exist in our own imagination. And he takes a series of examples, like something called the spotlight effect, for example, which is essentially we are the star of our life is like a film, and we are the star of the film, of our own film. And what we think is everybody else is watching this film, and they are watching us, and they are judging us on what we look like or what we say. Of course, nobody is interested because they're the star of their own film, and it's but having this explained to us doesn't actually stop us thinking like this, because we're so kind of into ourselves, or we're so egotistical. It's just kind of a thing that our brain does. We put ourselves at the center of everything. Once we can start to understand that most people, most of the time, aren't even aware of our existence, and certainly are not listening to everything we say or making judgments. Once we can understand that, then we just get on with what we need to do. Does that make sense? So it's, again, simplifying things just allows us to make progress.
Basically understanding the situation and then getting to the judgment that, this is something I can't do, or this is something I can do. Instead of being scared all the time of the consequences, we can spend time in understanding the situation from a broader level and make it simpler and clearer. So we are in a better position to take decisions.
Yes, absolutely.
That's really inspiring and insightful. So this post I stumbled upon some time ago, and this was about what Britishers write or say versus what they mean.
Oh, yes.
You remember? I was so inspired by that post, and because that kind of struck a chord with me. And I could relate myself being in that situation a couple of times where I felt the word which came out, for me, that was a literal meaning which I took. Maybe the person was coming from somewhere else. Maybe the person wanted to say something else. So I have to make this point an important point in our conversation today, because I'm pretty sure there are so many non-native English speakers who would love to know about it, that how can we actually understand it even better, or if there are any books or anything that you can recommend about it. So it would be, let's simplify. Number one, if you could delve a little deeper into this nuances of context of English and what especially the Britishers are saying and what they mean, number one. And number two, if you could guide how we can and really understand that cultural differences in different contexts when we are communicating globally. I think that would be one of the most helpful thing which I can learn, and I'm pretty sure our audience can too.
Okay.
Over to you.
No, I will try my best, but remind me, because I have trouble holding even one thought in my head at the same time.
Don't worry, I'm here.
No, well, that it's very kind of you to refer to that, but that was written as a kind of a joke, at the expense of the British, and I can do that because I am British, so I can laugh at British before they do. But it's trying to make a serious point, And it's one I feel very strongly about, not just because I'm a language teacher, but there's also the kind of effect of that kind of language, which is essentially very difficult for people to understand, becomes somehow the model that people think that they need to copy. And you've kind of opened a Pandora's box here, Kashira, because this is a very strong but negative motivation of mine for being in the language teaching industry, which essentially I think is all wrong. The language teaching industry, even before you open any kind of textbook, it's, there are teachers and there are students. Okay, so there immediately we have a pedestal that the teacher knows everything, the student, is learning. Well, that's okay. But when you apply that to people who, I don't know, run their own businesses or have families or, have a lot of life or commercial experience, and you're still calling them teachers and students, it starts to become a bit, counterproductive. In fact, it's insulting that, maybe some 20-year-old guy from Michigan who has never left the state is teaching someone like yourself, a professional with years of experience about culture and business, and there's still that teacher and student relationship or positioning. Essentially, I don't think the language industry really serves its purpose. And that post that you were referring to was trying to point to that. So the worst thing you can do in British culture is to offend somebody. Okay? Until, of course, we start drinking alcohol, and then we offend everybody in the world at the same time. No, but there are cultures. Britain is one of them. Japan is another, where there is almost a fear of saying something that might offend somebody, which means that you use polite English to express yourself. And that works fine with British people because it's a kind of code and they understand the code and they respect people who are saying things that are tough and hard, but they are saying them in a polite or gentle way. And that's great if you understand the code. But most people outside Britain don't understand the code. And they have, and I've lived in Spain for 20 years, and the Spanish have a very direct culture. When they speak, they say what they mean. And that doesn't mean they go around offending people. It just means that communication is much clearer. People disagree, people agree, but the language serves its purpose and it fits in a Spanish, social culture and a business culture. And so when you get Spanish people who are put in front of the kind of language that you're referring to, they have no idea that there's kind of two messages going on. Yeah. Now, what do we do with that? Well, we put the British in a box and we say, OK, when you're talking or listening to the British, and this is where my little sheet comes in, when they say this, they actually mean this. OK, so when they're saying something to be polite, the real message is not so polite, but you need to understand the real message, obviously, in order to be able to progress. But when we're dealing with the rest of the world, it's kind of obvious. Don't say what you don't mean because you think it sounds sophisticated. And this is where the language teaching industry, again, has a responsibility because it does teach this kind of British polite English, which doesn't serve the purpose of communication, international or otherwise, for the people that are learning English. And we come again to the same point. Keep it simple, keep it clear, say what you mean, which is usually, it's not complex English, so you don't need all of these polite subjunctives and conditionals and language is much simpler than most teachers lead you to believe. That's my that's my little message. So that post was a bit of fun, but it indicates a serious problem on what people think that they need to learn. And you know, if you just do the numbers, the native English speakers, the people like me, we've got the Americans, we've got the Brits, we've got a few Irish people, we've got some Australians. It is less than 5% of the world's population. And, you know, under any kind of system, those people should not be dictating how the language is used by the something like 1.75 billion non-native speakers. It makes sense, doesn't it? Because, sorry, no.
Go ahead.
No, because you know, the world is changing culturally, economically. And I sound like some kind of revolutionary here, but you know, the reason that the English became the global language, partly to do with the British Empire, of course. You know, the Brits basically ran the place in the 19th century. The Americans ran the place in the 20th century, or most of it. And the language that they used was English. So if you wanted, you know, to trade, if you wanted to do anything really, you had to do it in English. But towards the end of the century, and certainly in the new millennium, the economic powers are different. The trade is different. The way we're doing everything is different. And English is one of the global languages, but it doesn't have to be the kind of static language that the Brits and the Americans use. I mean, it doesn't make them bad people. It just makes them completely inflexible and insensitive to how most of the world, most of the time, needs to communicate. See, I warned you. I am a closet revolutionary.
I have to say this thing, Nigel, and I'll be extremely honest about it, that being cognizant of the fact that when you speak, it's just not that, oh, I've said it, now it's on to you to understand. No, it cannot be like that. That is not a communication.
Of course.
Okay. Whenever it comes to communicating and you want people to understand globally, be it a native to non-native or vice versa, it is in the court of a speaker that they make sure that other people understand, whosoever you are, whichever part of the world you are. Okay, so there's this speech which I have been delivering a lot. This is the title I gave. It is very intriguing. It is called as Sorry, I Didn't Get It. Okay. And I think I have traveled to 2-3 cities talking about it. And every time I get on a stage and talk about it, I could see that roaring emotions in people's heart, how enthusiastically they're able to connect with every word I'm saying, because this is something people don't talk about, especially when it comes to the English language. Number one, we've all over the world, everybody has accepted the fact that English is a business language and we have to deal in that language, right? That is the currency of language. Perfect. Now, whatever it is, everybody across the world, we bring our different selves to the table. Whenever it comes to working in global companies, what happens is with non-native English speakers, people like me, Indians, Spanish, and outside, I know the feeling of Indians. People get intimidated when somebody speaks in fascinated English, when somebody uses complicated words, and there'll be hardly anybody who will have the courage to stand up, say that, sorry, I didn't get it. Could you say that again? Nobody.
Yeah, so it's that word again, isn't it, Kashira? Courage. Yes.
Courage, exactly. Courage and understanding that it is just the language, a medium through which we communicate. There is nothing else about it. So one is about Indian speaking to Indian in some high vocabulary words. Second is we get intimidated when a foreigner is speaking in English.
Of course.
Had it been Kashira a couple of years ago, had I not been able to understand your accent, I would have been, oh my God, what are you saying? I would have been like all, nervous and getting that goosebump because this is what happened with me. So when I deliver this talk titled, sorry, I didn't get it, this is what I tell people. I tell them about my story that I was in a global call, a similar kind of a Teams call when I joined a multinational company. It was my first or second day, and I was invited to a leadership call where everybody was from either UK or America, and I think I was the only non-native English speaker. And everybody was speaking in their own tone of speaking, in their own speed of speaking, and in their own kind of a humor and jargons. I'm sure, we have our own jokes, you have your own jokes,
absolutely.
but making sure that if there is somebody not from your culture, then you speak in a way that somebody else speaks. Usually people don't do it. And that time I was asked something. I think it was very funny line today. When I hear, I find it so funny that I could not understand at that time. It was something about that we'll go round the table and, people will start introducing. And I didn't know what does round the table mean at that time.
Right. Yeah.
Okay. It was a simple thing.
Yep.
And the only thing which I needed to do in that moment was say that, hey, could you explain that? What do you mean by round the table? And then I would have been absolutely immune to that nervousness and start my introduction. But that point in time, I didn't have the enough courage. I felt like, oh my God, I look like a fool. I already started looking like a fool to myself.
Yeah,
I couldn't understand basic
but
English.
I absolutely get that. The phenomenon, it just does make me so. I'm not annoyed. It just makes me despair sometimes. And the reason is because the people that you're talking to, it doesn't, they're probably not bad people, but just taking the Americans and the Brits, first of all, we are completely unaware of that until it is pointed out. And even then, we're not really, if you say, could you just slow down, and people may slow down for 30 seconds and then they're off again. It is almost physically impossible.
True.
Even when we realize there's a problem and we're trying to do something about it, it is almost, there's something going on in our collective heads that stops us. There are kind of jokes about British, they kind of shout at people because, I don't know, they think that somehow helps communication. But it's a real issue. But I want to kind of twist that, on the basis of what we're saying about the way we communicate, the kind of hierarchy, the kind of structures. Things are changing in our society, in our world, in our tech. And, I'm fairly optimistic that the world will not wait for native speakers to kind of understand the problem and do something about it, because the world is in a bigger hurry. And actually, it's, the issue that I'm not surprised, first of all, that talk has such impact. But I teach exactly the same. There's a little, I'll put a post up in the next couple of days. In fact, I've actually put something which is called the manifesto on my website, which is there's 10 points in this manifesto which will resonate with these kind of problems. So there's so much in this issue that drives me completely crazy. But the real point is, don't let that native English speaker intimidate you.
True.
Because basically most people are, act in good faith. They will be completely unaware that you have a problem until you make it clear.
A point.
And they will usually try. That doesn't mean that they will succeed, but they will try to solve that particular problem. They may not be able to adjust anything else. But once they become aware that they are not communicating effectively, maybe it slows them down. Maybe it changes the atmosphere in the meeting.
True.
But it is almost something that they cannot do anything about.
True.
It's a bit like phrasal verbs, which are an absolute nightmare for, they're my absolute top of my list pet hate, because it's another kind of secret code that native speakers use to communicate with each other. They are almost impossible to understand if you're not a native speaker, and they are completely pointless when you are speaking to another non-native speaker, because by the rule of numbers, that person probably, even if they knew that phrasal verb, would not understand the context. So they're completely useless. And yet language schools give you tests on them, give you lists, make you feel inadequate if you don't know how to use them. It's absolutely ridiculous.
True. Absolutely.
Sorry, I'm being rather destructive rather than constructive here.
Not at all, trust me, not at all. Because I think you being a native English speaker, I'm sure when people are going to listen it from you, even other side of the world is acknowledging, that will leave a lasting impact and a kind of encouragement that it is only a few seconds game wherein you have to show courage and ask person to slow down or say it again, and that's it. This is all about it. See, we overnight we can't expect somebody else to change their way of talking. Neither we want that to happen to ourselves, nor we can expect it from somebody else. The simple way to conclude it is that yes, the other side of the world should be cognizant of the fact that if it is a global communication, I should be speaking in a way that others understand. At the same time, the remaining part of the world, including people like me, they have to understand that I need the confidence to say, even to a native speaker, that I did not understand. Do you mind saying that again, please?
Yes.
Do you mind slowing down a bit, please?
Yes.
Let's try to understand once again. Wow, what a change will that be? That is the only thing which we need. We don't need to add too much of vocabulary to our communications. Yes, vocabulary is important, but don't just kind of flood it that you don't know which word to choose and you're stuck there.
No,
So
absolutely.
Keep it simpler, keep it clearer, and have the courage to voice out for what you don't understand.
No, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, you talked about nuance, and from your public speaking that there are techniques which you can use, and on this particular point, I just say there are three things you can do, especially if it's in a conversation rather than a meeting. First of all, you can just say sorry, just that one word. You say sorry with an upwards inflection. Sorry, which is kind of question, and then you leave a silence. You don't have to say anything else. And what most native speakers do is they understand at some subconscious level, oh, I need to repeat what I've said. And they will say, usually they will paraphrase what they've just said. They'll give you another chance to understand what they've said, just with that one word. Okay?
True.
The second one is, again, one word, which is pardon. Pardon. Just like that. It's not a question so much as a statement. It does go up at the end. When you say sorry, that's kind of sorry, ... There's a little space. But you can say pardon, and you say it in a slightly more assertive way, which is, look, I'm trying to understand you, but you're making this difficult for me, but I'm going to give you another chance. And the secret is, because we're coming back to that polite, you're saying sorry, or kind of excuse me, I didn't understand, but you don't need to say that. You just say sorry and pardon. You're being polite. It kind of works in a way that people repeat things without even being asked to.
Yeah.
If that doesn't work, you're on kind of the third one, which is we have to kind of address this issue. But once again, because you are polite and you say, sorry, excuse me, I didn't quite catch that. Just those words. I didn't quite catch that. So you're saying sorry or excuse me, so you're being polite. I didn't quite means we don't have to do a lot here. You just have to adjust a few things so that I can understand. We're very close to the result. I didn't quite. And then you say catch that. I didn't catch it, which is a kind of idiom. It's informal language.
Okay.
Which means, I didn't understand your meaning. But you don't have to say, please, can you slow down, or please, you have to repeat that, because people get very anxious when they use that kind of semi-formal language. What I'm saying is, if you practice sorry, pardon, or excuse me, I didn't quite catch that, you can use them, you don't have to use them in that order. But once again, if you just practice this, experiment, take a risk, very quickly you'll be in a position where you can get people to explain themselves without really them being conscious that you're doing it. This all operates on a very low kind of frequency. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. I think that is amazing. And I was actually about to ask you something like this that you could share with our audience, but you are proactive and you picked it up instantly.
Well,
so thank you.
I know
for
how
that.
frustrating it is. I know how frustrating it is.
Not at all. I like to be honest, and had it been frustrating, I would have been the first person to say that. But this is amazing. Recap, as Nigel rightly said. Number one, if you're a non-native English speaker, instead of expecting others to change overnight or anything, please bring a slight change in yourself. And that change is only about adding that confidence to say, okay, so I've been saying other things to native speakers, as Nigel said. Number one, you could say sorry. Number two, you could say pardon on that. So I have been feeling that when you just say sorry or when you just say pardon, it seems like more kind of a rude thing. So that has been my understanding as a non-native speaker. So for me, I felt that, sorry, could you say that again, please? Maybe using the full sentence will be more polite. But as Nigel, being native speaker, has said it himself, if we're gonna just feed these few words in our mind, sorry, pardon, or excuse me, I didn't catch it, this will do wonders. So this allows the speaker to rephrase and tell you things in a better way. So I think that can sort out a lot of our problems, especially when you are communicating globally and dealing with people all over the world. So that could ease out.
That's good advice. Just to try and experiment with this, imagine you're talking to your grandmother, okay?
Okay.
And because your grandmother, her voice is not quite as loud as it used to be. I don't know your grandmother, obviously, Kashira, but obviously, being your grandmother, you're going to be patient. You're going to be respectful. You're going to make an effort for her to understand what she's saying. Imagine you're talking to your grandmother. So you're not apologizing. You're not taking responsibility. It's almost as if you can't quite hear what she's saying. So you're saying, sorry?
Sorry. Yeah.
In quite a gentle, soft way, but sorry? Not I'm sorry that I didn't understand, but sorry. And imagine those three little dots like you have in a play at a theatre.
Yeah.
Dot, dot, dot. You're waiting for a response.
Yeah.
Like I said, just experiment with it.
Yeah. Perfect. No, that's super amazing. Thank you so much for sharing that. Just one last question for you. I know there are so many people who want to be able to speak publicly with that kind of confidence. I think there's this word glossophobia. That is one of the biggest fear with which people live every day. Not just about the public speakers who want to take the stage, also about having a conversation in everyday life. That kind of speaking confidence is also something which a lot of people don't have. So from your experience, because you've been into this industry, if you could share some quick tip for the people that they can implement and make themselves better speaker.
Okay, that's a good one. And maybe my answer is not quite what you expect. But what I would do, and this works a bit differently because so many of us work from home as opposed to an office. But I've been doing this ever since I worked for a company called Telefonica in Spain, the big ex-state telephone company, had, I don't know, 140,000 employees or something ridiculous, and it had a problem because it had merged with O2, a UK company, and they had this kind of incorporation of lots of British and Irish native speakers. So you can imagine everyone in Madrid was going completely crazy, thinking their nightmare is about to turn into a reality. And the HR director asked me, Nigel, how do we find the good English speakers? And I said, well, you've got, your Telefonica, you've got a database of all the people who can speak English in your company. And she said to me, bearing in mind this is the HR director, she said, yeah, I know lots of people have got certificates, but that doesn't make them good speakers. And I said, you're quite right. Yes. And he said, how are we going to find them? And I said, we are going to combine speaking English with the second favorite pastime in Spain, which is drinking coffee. Okay. So 10:30. Don't ever expect anything to get done at 10:30 in the morning in Spain, because everybody at 10:30 in the morning, they go and have a coffee for 20 minutes. Because the Spanish, the British, we get up and we have a big breakfast and then we leave the house. Spanish, they get up, they have a glass of water and orange juice, and they're out the door in about 30 seconds. So by the time it's 10:30 in the morning, Spanish people need some caffeine and they need some sugar, and so they go and have coffee. Now, what I'm suggesting is what I suggested to the Telefonica HR director: send out a memo and say, because on the campus for Telefonica, they had all the cafeterias, and they said people can go for coffee, but they have to speak English. And the first person to speak Spanish pays for the other person's coffee. Okay. So my suggestion is, whatever it is, whether it's a cup of tea or a cup of coffee, people like to talk. Okay. And people who want to practice their English know other people who want to practice their English. So send them a memo or a text and say, I'm going to be in cafeteria, whatever, cafeteria X at 10:30 on Wednesday morning. Are you going to come? Sorry, send the first one saying, are you interested in improving your English, to all the people that you know on your network? And 50% of those people will say yes. And then, okay, I'm going to be in cafeteria X on Wednesday at 10:30. And say 30% of those 50% will say yes. Arrange to meet somebody or several people every day for a coffee, and say, right, we're going to speak English, and the first person to speak whatever language you're speaking pays for the coffee or the tea or the snack or the whatever. That's it. If you're clever, first of all, you never have to pay for another coffee again. Secondly, if you organize people, you don't have the same conversation with the same person. Maybe you just have 10 people. You meet one each day for coffee. By the time you get to number 10, number one has 2 weeks of stories to tell you the next time. Do you get what I mean? If you just make this a non-serious, natural, conversational, because you're going to say, hello, how are you? You're going to do all the boring stuff the first couple of times. And then you're going to talk about their family or their careers or their objectives or whatever. You can start using the kind of language that we use when we're talking to people who, we're interested in or we work with. Or so really what I'm saying is make it part of your daily routine.
True.
Don't, it's not lists of vocabulary that you have to remember. It's not, films that you have to watch. It's not a chore. It's not something that is becomes boring or onerous, it's something natural, which is communicating with other people without a plan, without, a clear. You're not making a presentation. You're just doing this normal, interactive communicating stuff. And the reason that's so important, Kashira, you know this, is because that's the basis for business, is relationships and building relationships. That's it. So what you're doing is you're practicing how to build your career. It doesn't sound like that because you're just having coffee. But this language that you practice that becomes normal, it doesn't need to be perfect. You just need to be clear. You're practicing what in some future conversation or interview or opportunity, you're going to have that language at the front of your mind, not in some textbook or in some lesson that you had with the teacher 10 years ago. It's going to be in your head.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sorry, that was a very long answer again to a very simple.
That was, and I'll again say that was extremely insightful, brilliant answer, because I resonate with it so much. Focusing on the casual conversations and seriously doing them.
Yes.
That thing can actually take us very far in our communication. And this is something which I have seen. For example, if there's a group of Indians, we all are sitting, we'll start talking because we know if I've just said a word, they'll get the vibe, they'll understand, and we will kind of start talking. But utilizing those conversations and being serious about it and saying it in a way you will be speaking outside of those small groups, that can be a game changer. It's like using every opportunity. So this is one another thing which I did when I started getting focused that, okay, this is what I have to do. This is what I have to, kind of sharpen my skills. Number one was I need to slow down. Maybe, we'll talk about it some other time because that is a chapter in itself. So many things about it. Second was I need to make use of every conversation opportunity I get. I don't have to rush. I have to take time and utilize that as a stage to talk. And what you just said, it was sinking in right in because I could understand how important it is. You don't have to wait for the opportunity. Even if you're talking to a courier person who has come to deliver, two lines over there that can help you in adding on few vocabularies, few phrases to your communication. So wonderful.
Absolutely. It is. It's, this is life. I can say this at my great age. It is. We think English is a mountain that we have to climb, or it's an ocean of work, and it is. There's tons of this English. We just need to put one step in front of the other.
Absolutely.
That's it. It's that simple. It couldn't be more simple. That's all we need to do. But if we don't stop, we just keep going, we keep making mistakes, we keep doing things wrong, but eventually we find new mistakes to make. That's what life is. That's what people like me who have a lot of experience just means we have made thousands of mistakes more than you have. That's all.
Yeah. True. Absolutely. Thank you so very much from bottom of my heart, Nigel. This has been one interesting conversation, super interesting conversation, because we could talk about the things which I literally felt were the problems when I started focusing on it, and how we can focus on it in much simpler way. I think this is what the world needs today. Number one, to understand that English is just a medium to communicate. Number two, there is no space, no requirement to get intimidated by anyone with any fancy English words. And number three, Nigel has shared with us few basic words and phrases to come out of that situation confidently. And number four, utilize the opportunities, whatever opportunities day in and out you get to take the stage and work on your communication. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. This is wonderful. I feel really blessed, Nigel, whenever in some or other way, in some or other capacity, I'm able to share few things with the people and tell them that I've also gone through these problems. So whatever you're going through, you're not sailing alone in that boat. There are so many people out there. So
Absolutely. Yeah. Great. Well, look, Kashira, thank you so much for having me. I don't think my wife can believe that somebody actually wants to listen to me for so long. No, but seriously, between my kind of destructive, get things out of the way, and somebody like you're very constructive. You're very clear in your thinking. You're very clear where you want to go. If the people on your podcast can look at it that way, they can achieve a lot of things.
Thank you once again. And
Pleasure.
as we conclude this wonderful and insightful episode, you take good care of yourself, Nigel.
Thank you for having me, Kashira. It's a pleasure. You take care too.